what drove you to go, look, I see a problem. I know they have those issues too. Let me approach them. And did you, and you
Sure.
probably got cut up a little bit just talking to them, I'd imagine, just because sometimes that relationship is really warm. Sometimes it's not. But
Yeah.
give us something on that.
So for me, first, I was having trouble personally as a pharmacy owner,
Okay.
understanding the aspects of the pharmacy, other than I'm passionate about it. I love patients. I love patient care. The other side of wholesaler, math of what is your cost of
Right.
goods, those things were challenging for me, to understand. And I would sit with several wholesalers, and everyone will tell me why the other person is actually wrong. And I said, wow, I've been able to figure out a lot of things, but it looks like this is way beyond my comprehension. So what can I do that I have self-control, that I love, that I understand how to get paid? So that was one thing that I was searching for. But at the same time, the way I took care of patients, whether when I was at CVS or at the independent pharmacy, I always liked to loop their providers back in. Like when I found something, I would always send them a message and say, hey, by the way, did you know this patient is also seeing a psychiatrist and they're prescribing these things? So my way of communicating was building friendships. So a lot of the providers, and I always laugh at the pharmacy, I say, oops, guess what? Dr. So gave me their cell phone now, so we're in.
We're in.
Because they start saying, I provide value. And so a lot of these providers be like, hey, here's my cell phone. If you ever need to ask me about my patient, just message me, because I was finding things that were critical. Right. So I started bypassing those faxes to a cell phone.
Right.
And then as pharmacy was getting tough, again, my curiosity, I just asked them, especially those who own their own practices, do they feel how I feel, that they love medicine, but maybe running the medical practice is not what they thought it was going to be? So those gave us relationships to communicate. And as I figured they're as stressed as me, I was like, oh, they're as a hot mess as I am. So you know what? Titles mean nothing.
Right.
These are people. So when I started really understanding the human to human connection, no matter what title you hold, when you run your own business, it's hard, right? So if we can figure out a way to work together and help each other is what I was looking for. And so when I knew that was an opportunity, I took it and I said, okay, let's see how we can make our lives better.
Yeah, it's funny you're talking about that. And when we talked earlier this week, you said something that I thought was really important. And you're saying that pharmacists right now are focusing on the things they can't do. And your life is kind of focusing on the things that pharmacists can do. And that just kind of feeds into, you found a doctor who felt the same way you did. Cool, let's do something with it. And that doesn't involve DIR fees or poor purchasing or selling.
Right. Yeah.
It's things that you guys can control and things that make a difference in those patients' lives.
Yes, because as I was searching, that was the subset of healthcare providers that literally got paid not because of goods, but because of services. And the more I learned about their services, I learned about services that they should do, but they don't, or they can't because they don't have time. And when I looked at those services, I said, that's up my alley. I can do those things for you, And then I said, and I would love to do these things, but I also have to stay in business, right? So that's the part that I feel a lot of pharmacists and providers get stuck. Is the friend zone. Now we're friends.
The friend zone.
I have their cell phone.
I love that.
How do we make this a business relationship? But I want to tell you that they are very much interested in making this a business relationship if you can show them how. So a lot of pharmacists don't know how to show them.
Right. So do you think COVID and the lack of visits has kind of increased or made someone have a better appetite, a provider having a better appetite for maybe they said no before, or maybe that there was a wall there before? Do you feel like that wall's kind of coming down a little bit?
Yes, there's a lot of pressure right now
Okay.
because of the telehealth models, right? The virtual care. So providers who were so used to office visits, nationally, there had been a decline. Right in March, there was a 70% decline in office visits. Now they're coming back up. So it's about 40 to 50%, that they're probably less. However, they don't know that you can solve that, right? So immediately what we did, as soon as we saw the visits down, our team of pharmacists, we had a meeting and say, guys, how do we help these folks? Because we need them to survive. So they cannot go under, right? So we're the ones who actually put a strategy and say, hey, pharmacist, when you see a patient that has no refill, don't just fax the provider. What can we do to make sure that patient sees the provider virtually so that provider can bill for a visit and we can help them? So again, we solved a problem. And so for pharmacists, go in. You have access to these lives. They're coming to you. They're either walking in your lobby. You can take some blood pressure for them and send it to their provider and say, hey, could you initiate a televisit and then give us a new script so everybody wins?
Right.
Otherwise, when you fax it to them and they fax it back, that provider doesn't win.
Right.
So what can we do that actually helps them as well?
Right. Well, and even beyond that, like I came out of the dialysis world prior to this, and a lot of the things we were looking at was how do we get patients to the dialysis seat? Not because that's how we got paid, but because if they missed that dialysis visit, that one visit, the next day they're in the hospital, right? And that $500 or $600 dialysis visit turns into a $25,000 hospitalization. And there's a real concern about patients that put off their their regular routine provider visits that will end up in the hospital later, and it's just going to just snowball the cost.
Yes. So COVID really, to me, opened up the door for better collaboration, especially with the remote access or remote patient monitoring.
Okay.
So we called our providers and say, okay, the folks are at home, right? We've been talking about remote patient monitoring, but it was something we're going to implement fully in the future, right?
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh, we got to think about technology. We got to think about this. Well, guess what? This is the time. So we ramped up and sent devices to patients' home with our drivers for blood sugar, blood pressure, and scales for the heart failure patients.
Right.
And as they're monitoring, within 5 seconds, we have the data. And our pharmacy technicians are actually monitoring. And they're prioritizing patients that are not on their optimal and sending a message to the providers. And the providers are initiating a televisit because they already have data.
And then let me link this back to some financials. And you and the provider are getting paid to do that remote patient monitoring.
Absolutely.
As an incident to, I am not the expert here, Josh, help me with even the wording, but, or Amina, it's basically incident to billing, right? I'm assuming under like a collaborative practice agreement.
So it's under collaboration.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
That means the doctor is allowed to delegate.
Right. Okay.
Any clinician that they feel comfortable to help them in co-managing a patient. They get to bill for it. They get to be the overall supervisor.
Right.
And out of that revenue, they can pay us. And they can keep some.